Hollywood films were also subject to censorship early on in the 1900s. However, this censorship resulted more from the actions of local community groups and organizations rather than federal, national government policies. In the early years of film, as movies became a more popular form of entertainment, local groups started forming to review and censor movies. Groups became worried that films would undermine the moral values of a community. People worried about the representation of sexuality and violence in these films, and worried that it would corrupt the morals of young people. As a result of the concerns of these community groups, many cities and areas created their own film review boards. These were groups that would review possible films to be exhibited or shown in their local communities. And these film review boards would make decisions about which films would or would not be acceptable to be shown in these areas. So essentially, these review boards were an active form of censorship, preventing certain films from being shown in certain cities or areas. In the 1930s, the film studios themselves took a more active role in self-regulating their own movies and monitoring the content of their films. The Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, MPPDA, established their own motion picture production code in the 1930s that laid out very specific guidelines about what kind of content would be acceptable or unacceptable in the films that they produced and distributed. This code laid out very specific guidelines about what kinds of portrayal of sexuality and violence would be permitted in these films and what would be prohibited. Now, in the same era, the Supreme Court decided in the Miracle case that films had free speech protection and had certain protection under the First Amendment. Now, as a result of that case, that made the activities of a lot of these local film review boards unconstitutional because it became impermissible for these local governmental bodies to censor particular films, because now that was seen as a violation of the film studio's First Amendment rights. So here in the 1930s, you see a real shifting focus away from censorship by local review boards and more direct control of the content of these films by the film studios themselves and their trade organization. Historically, the major film studios have tended to rely on self-regulation of their films, so that over the years the studios have had various policies designed to limit the amount of sex and violence in films and to limit certain content in the films perceived as objectionable by general audiences. Now, the reason for this self-regulation by the major film studios was to try and preempt any other government regulation of its industry or films. Over the years, there would regularly be certain social groups that would condemn Hollywood film studios for producing films that had too much sex or too much violence, and occasionally religious groups would argue that these films might corrupt young people. So film studios were always on guard to try and preempt these kinds of complaints and preempt any type of government regulation or oversight that might result. In the 1960s, the major studios developed a different approach to self-regulation. They unveiled a new ratings system for their films. This was produced by the Motion Picture Association of America, the MPAA, that was the trade association for the major film studios. And these ratings were designed to provide a guide to the American public about what age group was most suitable for films. The film ratings ranged from G for general audience and general audiences to X, which were for films that had a lot of sex and violence and shouldn't be seen by anybody under 17 years old. So the rating system has pretty much stayed intact over the past several decades. There have been a few changes. The MPAA added one more rating, PG-13, that was for films that had a bit more violence or graphic language than films rated PG. And the MPAA also replaced the X rating with NC-17. So films rated NC-17 were not to be seen by people under 17 years old. The First Amendment provides Americans with broad constitutional guarantees for free expression and free speech, so that as Americans, we have the freedom to express ourselves however we want on a variety of topics. Unfortunately, at different historical moments in American history, our society's commitment to free expression has wavered, particularly for allowing people to express unpopular views or views that are somehow in the minority. One such moment was in the 1950s at the height of the Cold War and the broad international conflict between the U.S. and the Soviet Empire. In this era of the 1950s, there was a cultural climate that was very hostile and antagonistic towards communism and any group that was considered left-wing or radical. And in this climate, you had a number of politicians and government leaders like Senator Joseph McCarthy that tried to drum up support for an anti-communist campaign. These politicians would identify certain entertainers or people working in media industries as communist or left-wing sympathizers. And in many cases, these charges were really loose and they were not supported. However, this led to a kind of a society-wide witch hunt for people in various industries that were considered to be communist or radicals or left-wing sympathizers. And particularly in media industries and in the film business, more specifically, many people working in film were blacklisted because of these allegations that they were communists or left-wing radicals. And these actors, directors, screenwriters were unable to get jobs in these media industries for many years to come. And I guess this historical period really raises questions for us about how strong is our commitment to free expression, and how willing are we as a society to let people express views that are unpopular or dissent in some way.